All right, it's about 9 o'clock. We're gonna get started here. Thanks everybody again for sitting in today. And just before we go, you know, we're gonna cover Rule 11 today. Again, I'm Robert Duke. I'm the director of rules and competitions for the Colorado Golf Association. This is our third rule we're gonna cover. Again, it's something we're doing in the winter to kind of stimulate our education. We normally would do, more in-person seminars, and this is just kind of take the place of that. So I hope you've enjoyed it so far. Again, we're going to post these on the website when we're done within a day or two. So if you've missed them and you want to catch back up, they will be there. So the other two from Rule 8 and 9 are already there. So we'll get started here in a sec. But again, thanks everybody for hanging out this morning. Again, before we go over, or before we start rather, any questions? I've got some question slides kind of peppered in there between each subsection of rule. We'll stop and do questions then. If you have any questions, Ashley's going to facilitate that with the mic. Or if you want to type it into the comment box, just type it in, hit enter. Ashley can facilitate those. A lot of times, if you ask a question, I might answer it during the actual presentation. So, I might do it for you there. But in any case, at the end, when we're done, if you've got a question on this or just something else, that's fine too. I'll be hanging around to answer questions when we're done. So I'm not going to go anywhere. So any question you have today will get answered. So, if it's early, write it down so you can remember it. But we're going to get started with Rule 11 today. And this it's got a lot going on, as we'll see. But there's 3 sections to it. And it's first, ball in motion accidentally hits any person or outside influence. Ball in motion deliberately deflected or stopped by a person. That's Rule 11.2. And then in Rule 11.3, which is the last part, is deliberately moving an object or altering conditions to affect a ball in motion. As you've seen here, the big difference between this and what we covered last week is last week, that was a ball at rest. This is a ball in motion. This is a live ball. We're going to cover that at length here shortly. Notice here in section 11.1, it's accidentally, and then 11.2 and 11.3, it's deliberately. So there's a very clear, line being drawn there with accidental and deliberate. I think that's how we can help make a ruling when we're out there. And if we're applying the rules, say, well, was it accidental? Was it deliberate? That's going to depend which rule takes place here. So again, starting off, each rule has that purpose statement, which is kind of the ethos of what the rule is about. And again, nothing rulemaking in this purpose, but it's just good to read to start off. So the purpose of this rule is Rule 11 covers what to do if the player's ball in motion hits a person, animal, equipment, or anything else on the course. The rules are going to get a lot more specific on those things here shortly. Because when this happens accidentally, there is no penalty, and the player normally must accept the result, whether favorable or not, and play the ball when it comes to rest. And that right there, that little sentence is 11.1, right, accidentally. And then Rule 11 also restricts a player from deliberately taking actions to affect where any ball in motion might come to rest. That's 11.2 and 11.3 kind of go moving to deliberately. So it fits both of those concepts right into that little purpose statement there. It goes on to say that this rule applies anytime a ball in play is in motion, whether after a stroke or otherwise, except when a ball has been dropped in a relief area and has not yet come to rest. That situation is covered by Rule 14.3. More specifically, that deliberate, touching the ball in motion. It's 14.3D. We covered that a little bit. We're not going to get too deep into it because we cover Rule 14 in about 3 weeks. That's also a very big rule. We're going to see Rule 14 mentioned a lot in here, so we will touch on it for a moment or two. We got that covered later down the line. Again, here, this rule, and this is before we even get into the rules. This is between the purpose statement and 11.1. It says a ball is in motion. So conversely, last week we covered what happens to a ball at rest, Rule 9. On the bottom here, Rule 11 is in motion. So while it may seem similar, when you're applying the rules, if someone says, oh, someone kicked my ball in motion, well, you might, Rule 9 is applicable. No, this specifically is saying Rule 11 is covering a ball in motion and in play. So a live ball in play. Back into that rule, it says, except when a ball has been dropped in a relief area and has not yet come to rest. That is covered by 14.3. Again, 11.2C versus 14.3D. Talking about a ball in motion deliberately deflected or stopped. And 14.3D is a drop ball deliberately deflected or stopped. So while they're very similar, if the ball is in motion, you got to know, okay, was it in motion in play as a result of the stroke? or was it in motion because of a drop ball and is rolling around in the relief area? So those are very different situations. And Rule 11 there is kicking you to 14.3D and saying if it's after a drop ball, go here. If it's a live ball, ball in motion, a ball in play, we're staying here in Rule 11. So it's kind of telling you where to go and where to stay. We see that a couple other times in this rule as well. So we'll keep an eye on that. All right, so getting right into it. Ball in motion accidentally hits person or outside influence. This is Rule 11.1. In A, no penalty to any player. This is if a player's ball in motion accidentally hits any person or outside influence, there is no penalty to any player. And this is true even if the ball hits the player, the opponent, or any other player, or any of their caddies or equipment. So pretty broad reach we've got here, and let's break this down. The first part is, again, accidentally. Remember, Rule 11.1 is accidental, 11.2 and 3, those are deliberate. So it's accidental. So it's highlighted twice here. And if it hits any person or outside influence. Well, again, we're going to key in on outside influence here for a second, kind of like we did last week, right? So an outside influence, going to the definitions, is any person, including other player, except those 6 people, player caddy, partner caddy, or opponent caddy, any animal, and any natural artificial object, or anything else, including a ball in motion. That's a very big range there for what is an outside influence. An outside influence, like we saw, is not those 6 people or natural forces. Going back into the rule, it says if a player hits any person or outside influence. So we covered outside influence, and it was not those 6 people, any person. This loops in those 6 people, potentially, that were not part of an outside influence. So now we've opened up the except part, right? So any person, including outside. So this includes literally anybody, right? So this is what's covered under 11.1a, right? So any person or outside influence, it means literally anything, except natural forces, very technically, but that's, obviously that's part of the game, natural forces. So this is a very broad range of things, any outside influence or any person. So, and it even goes on to say in that second bullet point, it emphasizes this is true if it hits the player, the opponent, any of their caddies or equipment, and then via the blue text in 23.5, the partner is always kind of looped into that as well. So anybody is what they're saying here. That's how we're starting off. Ball hits anybody accidentally, no penalty. There are exceptions, and that's the simple part of the rule, I guess, right? Then we're going to get into the exceptions of this rule, and there's quite a few, and we'll go into those. So the exception is the ball played on the putting green in stroke play. So the player's ball in motion hits another ball at rest on the putting green, and both balls are on the putting green before the stroke. The player gets the general penalty, 2 penalty strokes. So here, let's focus on this. This is in stroke play. So the rules are specifically isolating. We have stroke play and match play. There's 2 forms of play here. It's specifically isolating stroke play, meaning, and it even goes on to say there at the bottom, general penalty, parentheses, 2 penalty strokes. That 2 penalty strokes is again, isolating. This is a stroke play penalty. If it was just the general penalty, it wouldn't say that because it would also infer a loss of hole in match play. So right here, by omitting match play and really singling out stroke play, this is a stroke play rule that we're talking about here, meaning, if this was in match play and this happened, then there wouldn't be a penalty, right? It would just be play the ball as it lies. We get into that a little more later, but here, and we're going to actually get called back to this in 11.1b exception 2. We're gonna see this again, and we're gonna highlight it more. But so by calling it stroke play, that means this is not applicable in match play. In match play, you still play it as it lies, but there's no penalty structure associated with it. It's just no penalty. Again, this is saying player's ball in motion hits another ball at rest. When we see those words, what it's inferring is, and there's a definition of in play. And that says when a rules refer to a player's ball at rest or in motion, like we just saw, that means the ball is in play. It is moving as a result of a stroke, or it's been put down, right? When it says at rest, the ball is live, it is in play, it's a live ball, or in motion, obviously the result of a stroke. So that when you see at rest or in motion, think in play. And again, in play is the status of a player's ball when it lies in the course and is being used in the play of a hole, right? So that ball's in play. Going back to the exception, again, we'll come back to this later. Moving to 11.1b, right? The ball must be played as it lies. If the player's ball in motion accidentally hits any person or outside influence, the ball must be played as it lies, except in these 2 situations. And again, you're saying it must be played as it lies. So in a way, it's saying the opposite is also true. In these exceptions, the ball must not be played as it lies, and we're going to see that you must take relief, right? So when it says it must be played as it lies, except in these situations, you can infer in these two situations, the player must not play the ball as it lies, which you see right there. Instead, the player must take relief. And this is the first exception under 11.1b. When a ball played from anywhere except the putting green comes to rest on a person, animal, or moving outside influence. And right here in the exception, it says the word on, which we've highlighted. So, that's a very specific instance of it's not touching the ground, right? It is on something. It is up in the air somehow, right? And again, some specific instances of any person, animal, or moving outside influence. This doesn't happen a lot. I will preface this whole exception as this is not used a lot. You see it on tour sometimes when it maybe hops into vehicle or even spectator's bag or something. We've seen that before, but generally this does not happen a ton. And here it isolates a moving outside influence, which we'll see in the second exception. So this is the first exception. The second exception to this rule, it talks about a movable obstruction. So there's a difference there. It's not the same thing. Person, animal, or moving outside influence. Exception 1, exception 2, person, animal, or movable obstruction. So here, a little different than the second exception. So moving outside influence. Again, it says the player must not play the ball as it lies. So here, this is not a choice, right? You can't play it off of a person, animal, moving outside influence. Not that you really even could. But the rules are saying you must take relief. You must not play the ball as it lies. Instead, the player must take relief as follows. And in this section, before we get into it, it's broken down really into two parts here, right? So when the ball is anywhere except on the green, right? And so when we look at it, kind of the progression of where the ball came from, where the ball is going, we've got a ball played from anywhere except the putting green. That's the ball played from, and it comes to rest anywhere except the putting green. So again, looking at our areas of the course, think about it like this. If a ball played from anywhere except putting green, teeing area, bunker, penalty area, general area, comes to rest anywhere except the putting green. So teeing area, bunker, penalty area, general area. So that's kind of the progression, where it's played from and where it comes to rest. When we're breaking down this rule, that's a big thing to look at, because within each subsection, as we're going to see, it very much depends on where the ball was played from and where it came to rest in exception 1 and 2 and in 11.2. So it's really going to be a big thing. So we're going to see this graph again later. But again, just notice where it's going, where it's from and where it's going to, or where it landed or where it came to rest, right? The second part is when a ball is in the putting green. So again, the progression of where the ball was played from anywhere except the putting green on the putting green. So ball was played from anywhere except the putting green, teeing area, bunker, penalty area, general area, comes to rest on the putting green. So again, very different there. So it's important to know in which part to apply, where it came from and where it's going. So keep an eye on that. So again, getting into the first part, when ball is anywhere except on the putting green, the player must drop the original ball or another ball in this relief area. And again, remember we had this areas of the course slide in Rule 8. We started off with what area of the course does it lie in, or in this case, where does it not, right? So we're saying not the putting green. So this is a very wide area. This is where most of your golf is going to take place. You got a very specific area, right, of the putting green, and then all these other areas that we're including on this one. So this is not the putting green. So when ball is anywhere except on the putting green, again, the player must drop the original ball. Again, we're looking at drop here. So when it's not on the putting green, we're going to drop a ball when putting it into play if we're applying this exception here. So we're dropping it. We're going to establish a reference point, which is the estimated point right under where the ball first came to rest on the person, animal, or moving outside influence. And this is a big estimate, and it even says it right here, the ball first came to rest. So if you hit it into a moving cart, you're going to estimate, well, where did the ball first come to rest in that moving cart? This is a guessing game. We're trying to do our best. And the rule even says that. We're going to double back a second and say the estimated point. So this is not science necessarily. You're going to say, well, I hit it in this area. It landed in the cart around here. That's your estimated point where it first came to rest. So again, not an exact science. You're just doing your best to kind of figure out when it started this whole progress here. And then we're going to get a relief area. So we've got a reference point. The size of the relief area measured from the reference point. It's 1 club length, but with these limits. Again, club length, this is the first time we've seen it. Really didn't see it much in Rule 8 or 9. But here, again, it's italicized, meaning it's a definition. So what does club length mean? We're going to jump to a definition, and that's the length of the longest club of the 14, which is the maximum allowable number of clubs you can have, the player has during a round, other than the putter. So it's specifically excluding the putter, because you can still have those long putters. You can't anchor them, right? But you can still have those long putters. So this is excluding that. So 99 times out of 100, it's going to be your driver. And it goes on to say, for example, if the longest club, other than the putter, a player has during a round is 43-inch driver, the club length is 43 inches for that player for that round. So when you see club length, think 43 inches. If we get into Rule 17, we talk about penalty areas, it'll say 2 club lengths. That's, in this case, within 86 inches from the reference point. So again, just a quick aside there about what a club length is. It says with these limits, right, the relief area is limited to being in the same area of the course as the reference point and must not be near the hole in the reference point. So when you establish the reference point of where did the ball first come to rest in this person, animal, or moving outside influence, it has to be in the same area of the course. If that point is established to be in the general area, your relief area has to be in the general area. 95 times out of 100, this is going to resolve itself, because very little, the situation would yield 2 areas of the course within 1 club length. Typically, it's going to, by default, you're going to have just 1 relief area that's in 1 area of the course to drop in. But theoretically, if where your reference point is and your relief area, there happen to be 2 areas of the course, whether it's general area bunker, general area penalty area, you have to keep it in the area of the course where the ball first came to rest. So again, this is mostly going to resolve itself, but just want to review that. Again, we're looking at a drop here, right? So you're dropping the ball in this relief area. So hypothetically, again, my ball came to rest here on a moving golf cart. That would be a reference point, and then I established my relief area in this. So I, even though my ball estimated to come to rest at the reference point, I get 43 inches in either direction, or really 43 inches from that anchor point. And we're assuming we're playing downstream, so the hole is this way. So, and then obviously no closer to the hole. So this is a pretty wide area. So in that relief area, on the right side, maybe there's a little divot there at the top. Stay out of that. Go to the other side. You can pick and choose here. You have a very wide area to potentially drop your ball in, right? So, all right. And then part of this exception, going back, is when the ball is played from anywhere except putting green comes to rest on any person, animal moving outside influence, the player must not play the ball as it lies. Instead, the player must take relief. When ball is anywhere except putting green, just covered that. And then when the ball is on the putting green, right? So and just to take a second here, when we look at, a lot of this in Rule 11, where it applies, there's a lot of times where, not putting green, putting green. It doesn't delineate between bunkers and penalty areas. It's very split between putting green, not, in that regard, you think about it, golf, there's essentially 2 games going on. There's the putting green, and there's everything else, because everything else, we've got sand, we've got tall grass, short grass, rough, fairway, divots. A lot of conditions exist outside the putting green. When you play on a putting green, especially when you watch on TV on like a tour event, it's all perfect. It's all essentially the same lie. You had to mark it, pick it up, clean it, put it back down. The putting green is almost an entirely different game, right? You're playing it on the ground, you're putting it, you're not hitting it over in the air. It's almost the game transitions. You use the same club every time. So in the rules, you're going to see a lot of delineation between putting green and not putting green. To me personally, it's just an entirely different game because the rules change, right? We all know you can fix things in your way. A lot of those protected conditions affecting the stroke, you can't adjust your line of play or improve your line of play. Well, on the putting green, we can do that because it's all on the ground. So very separate here. So you're going to see a lot of these rules that we're looking at today, especially say, was the stroke made from the putting green? Did the stroke come to rest on the putting green? The dividing line is, you've got the 4 areas of the course and then the putting green. That's kind of where the line is, right? So putting green is a very special place. There's a lot going on in the putting green. We get to that in about 2 weeks. But again, just something to kind of note here. So now we're going to cover when the ball is on the putting green. So again, when the ball is on the putting green, the player must place the original ball or another ball on the estimated spot right under where the ball first came to rest on the person, animal, or moving outside influence, using the procedures for replacing a ball under 14.2b2 or 14.2e. Again, looking at here, when the ball is played from anywhere except the putting green, and then comes to rest when the ball's on the putting green, right? And this is, again, on a person, animal, or moving outside influence. Same thing, right? So when a ball is played from not the putting green, comes to rest on the putting green, right? So again, here looking at our map, this is very specific on the putting green. The ball played from off comes to rest on the putting green. Very specific. Again, we already covered what the player must do here. And again, we're placing the ball here. So in the last instance, I said we're dropping it. We're placing the ball on the putting green here. This is not, I can't say with virtual certainty that you always place the ball on the putting green, because there are instances where you do actually drop the ball on the putting green. It could be with an unplayable, if a ball's in a tree, or if you're taking unplayable relief out of one of the bunkers in the middle of the putting green, you're dropping the ball in that case. So not 95 times out of 100, you're going to place the ball on the putting green, which is what it's saying here. But we can't definitively say whenever you're putting a ball in play on the putting green that you always place it. There are 5 or 6 instances where you could drop the ball on the putting green, right? Penalty area is one of them. Theoretically, you could do that. We're going to get into that later, but again, just in this case, we're placing it. All right, so that's 11.1b exception 1. Now we're moving into exception 2. This one is the one that does happen more than you'd think. It does happen a fair amount, and this one's got a lot going on. This is the one that I think most people have hangups with. You see it a lot on rules tests about, the ball in motion hit this. Again, we're going to kind of break it down and where the stroke was made, where did the stroke come to rest on. Again, this is predicated that it's accidental, right? So to read this, the exception 2 says when a ball played from putting green accidentally, keyword, hits any person, animal, or movable obstruction, right? That's different than the first exception where it was moving outside influence. And here in parentheses, it says including another ball in motion on the putting green. It says the stroke does not count, so the stroke is canceled, and the original ball or another ball must be replaced on its original spot, which if not known must be estimated. And it says see rule 14.2, except in these 2 cases. We're not going to go that far yet. Again, predicated that it's accidental. And again, any person, animal, or movable obstruction, right? So the movable obstruction is a different part. Isolating that here, movable obstruction, and it says including other ball in motion. So that, again, that's not terribly uncommon to have 2 balls hit each other when they're in motion. Again, isolating movable obstruction, what is that? It's an obstruction that can be moved with reasonable effort and without damaging the course. Here we're going to look at the definition, got it underlined in green. Let's go to the definition of an obstruction. The first 3 bullet points are immovable obstructions, theoretically. These ones are, the green ones are more movable obstructions, right? A golf cart, a mower, car, other vehicles. Those can be moved. Waste containers, signposts, benches, depending on their situation on the ground. You can move a bench, you can't move a bench. And then player equipment, flag sticks, and rakes. That bottom one, that 6th one, that's what we're going to see most of the time on the putting green, right? A player lays their wedge down, lays a flag stick down. Rakes are in the vicinity of the putting green. Typically, they're not on the putting green, but they're near it if you've got greenside bunkers. So that last one's what you're going to see most of the time when you're applying this rule. Player equipment, flag sticks, and rakes. So back to the exception. So again, it's important to know it's very specific here. When the ball played from the putting green hits another person, animal, movable obstruction on the putting green. So again, looking at this chart, this is all taking place on the putting green, meaning if you played it from the putting green and it rolls off the putting green and hits a bag that's lying in the fringe or general area, then this doesn't apply. This is very specific and very confined. All the action is taking place on the putting green. The stroke was made from the putting green. The contact was on the putting green. So again, very isolated here to the putting green. That's what we're talking about. This is a clarification, and it's a little small. I couldn't really edit it very well, but it's just to add, there's a knowledge or virtual certainty factor here. So it says exception 2 to rule 11.1b is to be applied using the knowledge or the known or virtually certain standard, again, 95%. Therefore, if there is knowledge or conclusive evidence that the ball played from the putting green accidentally hit a person, animal, or movable obstruction on the putting green, the stroke does not count. So, it's saying there's, you got to know, again, 95% that, your ball contacted something on the putting green. So if it's like, well, I don't know, then there's not really knowledge or virtual certainty. You got to know, oh, yes, it did hit someone's putter or equipment laid down or an animal or something. There's a knowledge or virtual certainty standard when applying this rule. And then the second part is that living insects are, in this case, animals. Exception 2 to rule 11.b applies to living insects since they are animals. So this part here, it kind of deviates a little bit, and I just want to cover this just for due diligence. If you hit a bug right now, then you're going to have to cancel and replay it, or an insect that it's also an animal. So if you put it over a worm, technically you replay it. All that to say is the USGA also, they put in a new, this isn't even a clarification, this is a model local rule. And I don't want to spend too much time on it because it does get a little confusing, but it's worth mentioning. And this will be baked into the rules from what I've gathered in 2023. But the new model local rule they put out this year, that exception to 11.1b applies, except that when a ball played from the putting green accidentally hits the player that made the stroke, the club used by the player to make the stroke, or an animal defined as a loose impediment, that is worm, insects, and similar animals that can be easily removed, the stroke counts and the ball must be played as live. So this is a model local rule. This is going to be in play at higher level events, CGA events, USGA qualifiers, locally here, the Colorado Open, tour events. This is in play right now. But if it's a model local, so the committee has to say this is in play. If you look on the USGA hard card right now, it's going to say this. It's brand new. This is to say if you putt, hit a bug, or you hit yourself, right? Because this happened. The first part happened to Jasper Parnevik. He had an uphill 3-footer. He hit it, and he thought he made it, so he kind of did that quick step, and the ball broke late. Horseshoe came back and hit his foot. Very technically, that hit a person. It didn't say which person. It hits a person, and he was allowed, or actually required, to cancel and replay that stroke. That doesn't seem fair for getting a mulligan. It was totally accidental and kind of an unintended consequence. So this was put in, again, for higher level events. This is going to apply. If you're not playing in a championship or anything where this is in play, then the default rule applies, which is what we're covering now, the 11.1b exception to. And these would apply, right? The living insects are animals, because that happened to Paul Casey, actually, in a European Tour event. He putted, there was a ladybug, and his ball, it was kind of ambiguous whether it hit it or not. And if it did hit it, he would have been required to replay it. So this is just saying that those are part of those animals, the living insects. So again, not to spend much time on it, but wanted to touch on it because it is new. And for those of you that officiate, you're going to see this model local rule D7 at all the events. So it's just good to be familiar with it. Anyways, back to the exception. And just to take a moment here, this is when people say, oh, the rules are hard or difficult. This is a really good example of yeah, that's probably true. Because what we've got here is in the second exception to 11.b, right, that exception 2, that exception also has an exception. So there's an exception to the exception. So this is when, again, people say, oh, the rules are hard. In this case, yeah, they're right a little bit. There's a lot going on. This is all one big ball here. Everything's connected, so 11, there's a lot going on here. We're going to get into more later, but again, there's an exception to the exception. Even the exceptions have their own exceptions. So again, a lot to know here. Like we said, we read the first part already, and then the first exception to the second exception is a ball in motion hits another ball at rest or ball mark in the putting green. So again, the stroke does not count, and the original ball or another ball must be replaced on its original spot, which is that none must be estimated, except in these two cases. If the ball in motion hits another ball at rest or ball marker on the putting green, the stroke counts and the ball must be played as it lies. Well, again, looking at the action area here, so the ball played from the putting green hits another ball at rest or ball marker on the putting green. So all this is still taking place on the putting green, right? So we're still in that area. And it's referring to a ball in motion, right? A ball in play and a ball at rest. So in both cases, we have two live balls that are in play that have made contact one way or another. And it also adds, another ball at rest. It also adds ball marker, which is good because you could obviously imagine if I'm putting and I putt and I hit someone else's ball marker, which happens a fair amount. If this wasn't in play, it says the stroke counts and the ball plays as it lies. I would get a redo. So if there's a ball marker very near the hole and I roll over the ball marker and I miss, if this is in play, I could maybe theoretically, if there's another ball, or one of the things included in the second exception of ball in motion, rather, I would get to play it again. So it includes a ball marker. So anytime you hit a ball marker, you're going to be playing the ball as it lies. It's not a cancel. So that's a very good add here to say, yeah, a ball marker. And if it's in your way, as we know, you can ask someone to move it over and they measure it and move it over. So that's fine too. So ball markers included here. And then it says see rule 11.1a, where their penalty applies in stroke play. So we already covered that earlier, but we're going to look at it again. And it isolates stroke play here, right? So it says in stroke play, going back, and this is the first exception under 11.1a. So really, it says see Rule 11.1a for their penalty. What it means here is see the exception to Rule 11.1a. And the exception is the ball played on the putting green in stroke play. If the player's ball motion hits another ball at rest on the putting green and both balls are on the putting green before the stroke, the player gets the general penalty. So what we've got here is we know that the ball in the first bullet point up there, the ball is played as it lies. And if it's stroke play, right, we're going to get 2 strokes. And again, it isolates that here by saying in the general penalty, it could just stop there, but it says no, 2 penalty strokes. So again, it's very much inferring this is only stroke play, meaning that this does not apply in match play. In match play, you'd still play the ball as it lies, but you wouldn't be penalized. You wouldn't get a general penalty, loss a hole. You just simply play the ball as it lies. And that's, that's your right in match play to break off a second. And you could say, hey, mark that ball to my way. Or the opponent would have a chance to say, hey, please don't play it. I'm going to go mark that ball so you don't backstop off it. That's a whole thing in 15 we're going to get to. But this does not apply in match play. The penalty, that is. You still play the ball as it lies. So here, let's look at this here. Again, going back to why the rules are complicated here, and you're right, we've got essentially a triple exception kind of to get to this rule, right? So in the second exception, right here, right, it says exception 2. There's an exception to the exception, right? The second one, except in these 2 cases. And in the first bullet point, it refers you back to 11.a to that exception. So there are 3 exceptions in play in this specific instance. So if a ball played from the putting green hits another ball at rest that is also on the putting green, the ball in motion is played as it lies. And again, in stroke play, the player who made the stroke is penalized 2 strokes. So we have to essentially apply 3 exceptions to get to that ruling, which it's not an uncommon thing. I've seen it happen a decent amount of times where, in stroke play, you putt it and it hits another ball. Well, it seems simple, but you got to get to 3 exceptions to work through there really to get to that ruling. So again, this is where the rules, again, can get complicated because we've got a lot going on here. Again, another ball at rest hits another ball at rest. That's applicable here, right? Those are both in play, right? And then the second exception, so that was the first exception to the second exception. The second exception to the second exception is a ball in motion accidentally hits flagstick or person attending the flagstick. This is covered by Rule 13.2b2, not by this rule. We're not going to cover that. That's Rule 13. That's a whole other thing. We're going to get to that. But what this is there for is if in this situation, a ball is putted and it hits a flagstick on the ground, you go to Rule 11, ball in motion stopped or deflected. And in that it says, okay, yes, but go to Rule 13.2b where the flagstick is covered, because the flagstick is another very, very specific rule. We're going to cover that in 2 weeks. I'm not going to get into it now, but it kind of ping pongs you back. It takes you there, and then it says, okay, if it's accidental or deliberate, see 11.1 or 11.2. So we're going to get there in a couple of weeks, but here it's just saying you're in the right spot so far, but keep going to Rule 13 if it's the flagstick specifically or the person attending the flagstick. And then in penalty for playing incorrectly substituted ball or playing a ball from the wrong place in breach of Rule 11.1 is the general penalty under 6.3b or 14.7a. This is just the end of that 11.1. And if multiple breaches result from a single or related act, see Rule 1.3c2, right? So this is the end of that, just cleaning up the penalty structures here, right, for that. So real quick, we've finished 11.1, and that one was probably the longest one, and we're over halfway done, so we're doing good on time. But we'll stop for questions real quick, just do a couple. And Ashley, I might have you read a couple off real quick just to see if we've got anything we need to clear up.
Yeah, a couple questions came in here. First is, if my opponent lays his sand wedge down on the green while he putts, but doesn't move it, and my ball while putting hits his club, what's the rule?
So so you said opponent, so I'm assuming that's match play. So in match play, if I putt and hit the opponent's club, that's kind of what we just covered in 11.1b exception 2. The ball in motion hit a person, animal, or movable obstruction, in this case, a wedge, and the stroke could be canceled and replayed. That being said, if while the ball was in motion, and we're going to get to this in Rule 11.3, the opponent or other player in stroke play, they could pick that up. That's player equipment. You can move that. And again, that's an 11.3. But yeah, it's going to be a cancel and replay there.
Yeah, and
that's in that second.
There was clarification here. What about stroke play?
Same thing, right? So that doesn't really change. And 11.1b exception 2, it doesn't delineate if a ball hits equipment in stroke play or match play. The stroke play versus match play comes in if it's getting peeled back to 11.1a, the first exception there. So in stroke play, same thing. If I putt and I hit a wedge accidentally, then that's a cancel and replay.
Okay. One other question from the chat here. This is in reference to the model local rule D7. The question is, would there be a time when a double hit is canceled as opposed to played where it ends up?
Not necessarily. No. I mean, an accidental double hit is covered by Rule 10, and that's played as it lies. Again, predicated that it's accidental. If we get into a deliberate double hit, which I haven't seen, but that's different, deliberately hitting a ball. But accidental double hit, that's simply played as it lies. Putting green, other area of the course doesn't matter. That model local rule for D7, that is, very specific to the player, a bug, or the player equipment or the club used to make the stroke. So that's not accidental double hit. That's covered in Rule 10, and we did skip that, to be fair, between 9 and 11. But double hits, accidental is always just play as it lies.
Robert, that local rule D7 is also specific to the putting green, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Right. So, and it's those specific things, player's club, or a bug. Doesn't mention double hit necessarily, or accidental double hit. It's a good question, and I get where it's coming from, but it's going to be if it hits the player, and I guess the club, I don't think that would apply if it was an accidental double hit. But it's a good question, and it could come into play. I haven't seen a double hit on the putting green as much, but it happens.
I could see double hit, like bounce off the flagstick and come back and hit your putter.
Well, then it would apply. Yeah, I guess when we talk double hit, and this context is where the ball after the stroke is, so that, and yeah, so if it hits the flagstick and this local rule is in play, it would apply. You cancel and replay. A double hit after, that one I might have to look up again. That one I haven't really thought about that as much, as kind of brand new, because technically a stroke from the putting green did hit the player's equipment again. So that might actually be a cancel and replay. So that's a good question. We'll revisit that at the end, I think. If that local rule is in play, if it's not in play, you're always going to play as it lies. I'll have to think more about that one if it double hit, because very technically, if you double hit, you do hit your club twice. So which rule would take over, D7 or Rule 10? I'm not so sure, actually, now that I think about it. So we'll fold back to that one later. That's a good follow-up.
Okay, that's all that's in the chat right now, Robert.
Okay, we're going to keep going. Good questions. And again, let's remember to look back at that one on D7. I'll make a note of that, actually, because that's a good one to look at. Again, that's a brand new model local rule. It came out 2 months ago. So not really been in play much yet, so you haven't really seen it. So, all right, so 11.2, we're going to get into. Again, when we started this, we saw 11.1, 2, and 3. Those are the sections we're covering. 11.1 is accidental, 11.2 deliberate, 11.3 deliberate. So really, I draw the line that, the way I look at it, 11.1 is separate from 11.2 and 3. That's accidental. Now we're getting into deliberately doing something wrong, right? Deliberately. This is 11.2. So ball in motion deliberately deflected or stopped by a person. When 11.2 applies, it says this rule applies only when it is known or virtually certain that a player's ball in motion was deliberately deflected or stopped by a person. Again, we've got this knowledge or virtual certainty factor. So when you read this rule applies only when it is, you can say 95% certain that a player's ball in motion was deliberately deflected or stopped by a person. So we got the knowledge or virtual certainty factor there. Got to know, which is when, and it's going to tell you the instances here, a person deliberately touches the ball in motion. And again, deliberately is really lining up here, right? It's in the text of the header. It's in the introduction of the rule. It's in the first example of the rule. So again, very deliberate here, deliberately doing something. And the second one is the ball in motion hits any equipment or other object except a ball marker or another ball at rest before the ball was played or otherwise went into motion, or any person, such as the player's caddy, that a player deliberately positioned or left in a particular location so that the equipment, object, or person might deflect or stop the ball in motion. Again, got deliberately here a lot. Mentions it again in this part, deliberately, in that second bullet point. And then it has an exception kind of in here, in parentheses right in the middle, so it's easy to miss. But it says, except the ball marker or the ball at rest before the ball was played or otherwise went into motion. Again, we saw that in the 11.1b exception too, when it covered about hitting a ball marker or the ball at rest. In that case, Rule 11 applies in that case, or 11.1. Again, going back, like I just mentioned, 11.1b exception 2, ball hits another ball at rest or ball marker. This is covered by 11.1b exception 2. That's the exception. It kind of peels back there. All right. The exception to this is the ball deliberately deflected or stopped in match play when there's no reasonable chance that the ball can be holed. So an opponent's ball in motion is deliberately deflected or stopped at a time when there is no reasonable chance it can be holed, and when done as either a concession or when the ball needed to be holed to tie the hole as covered by Rule 3.2a1 or 3.2b1, not by this rule. And it goes on to say, for a player's right to have a ball or ball marker lifted before a stroke is made if he or she reasonably believes that the ball or ball marker might help or interfere with play. See Rule 15.3. We're going to stay out of that today. That's here in about a couple weeks or so, but that's in Rule 15. In this part, though, again, looking at the first part, this is an reference back to Rule 3.2b, and 3.2 is talking about match play, and 3.2a, they're very similar. Looking back real quick, what those mean. 3.2b1 is when you concede the next stroke. So this is allowed any time before the opponent's next stroke is made, and it tells you how to make concessions here. Again, match play only. The player may concede the opponent. Again, we see an opponent, that's match play. Next stroke by deflecting or stopping the opponent's ball in motion, only if that is done specifically to concede the next stroke, and only when there's no reasonable chance the ball can be holed. Meaning if, I'm putting and I've got a putt to tie the hole, or in this case, not tied, I've got a putt, and then as my ball's rolling by the hole and still in motion, my opponent just knocks it back and said, whatever was left is good, then I would have made the next stroke. So you can concede a ball in motion as long as the ball has no chance of being holed. And it kind of infers if the ball does have a chance of being holed, then this exception doesn't apply, and 11.2 would apply to say that ball was deliberately deflected or stopped when there was a chance it could be holed. We're going to find out later that my opponent who did that would lose the hole in that case, right? So that's when 11.2 applies. That's the exception. But again, you can deflect or stop a ball in motion via this rule in match play, only if it is done specifically to concede. In the same way also to, if it's not conceding the next stroke, you can do it to concede the hole, right? Or, oh, that's good, like you're going to win the hole anyways. So the next stroke or the hole, he can stop a ball in motion as long as there's no reasonable chance. So usually if you were to do that, you're waiting until it comes past the hole and we know it's not coming back, you can take it down there. So it's kind of folding back to that one in Rule 3.2. That's what we just covered there. So in 11.2b, so when penalty applies to a player gets the general penalty if he or she deliberately deflects or stops any ball in motion. Again, in motion, that's in play. This is true whether it's the player's own ball or a ball played by an opponent or by another player in stroke play. We just saw the exception to that opponent situation, right? That's match play. The rules say if you're doing it to concede a stroke, then this does not apply. But if you're not doing it to concede a stroke, you just deflected their ball on purpose, then yes, it would apply here. And the exception is the ball is moving in water. There's no penalty if a player lifts his or her ball moving in water, in temporary water, or a penalty area when taking a relief under Rule 16.1 or 17. And then there is an exception in Rule 10. Again, we did skip over 10 about playing a ball in moving water. So we're not going to cover that. And then 11.2b ends by saying, in foursomes, either player may act for the side, and action by the partner is treated as action of the player. In four ball, either partner may act for the side, and action by the partner concerning the player's ball or the equipment issues action by the player. So if we're partnered and my partner deliberately deflects or stops my ball, I would be on the hook for that. 11.2c says a place for deliberately deflected or stopped ball must be played. So, okay, we've got a situation now where a ball was deliberately deflected or stopped, And okay, now what do? Where do we play the next stroke from? What do the rules say? It says if it is known or virtually certain that a player's ball in motion was deliberately deflected or stopped by a person, whether or not the ball has been found. Again, we got the knowledge or virtual certainty factor there. It must be played as it lies. It must not be played as it lies. And the player must take relief. So if we know it was deliberately deflected or stopped by a person, we know that, then, we can't say, oh, well, I'll just play it from lies. The player said it must not be played. You have to take relief under this rule. Again, we got the in motion here, right? Like I mentioned, this is a live ball in play that was deliberately deflected or stopped. Just going to show, again, this is 11.2c. This is a ball essentially after the result of a stroke is in motion in play. If it's after a drop, that's covered by 14.3d. It's a drop ball. So this is specifically covering a ball in motion in play. Again, it's saying twice, you must play it from under one of these relief procedures. It says you must not be played as it lies. So you have to take relief. You can't say, oh, it was deliberately deflected to stop by somebody, but the ball is in a good situation, so I'm just going to play it from here. You can't do that. The rule is saying you must operate under below things we're going to look at here. Again, this part, 11.2c, is divided into two areas, right? So it's if the stroke was made from anywhere except the putting green, and if the stroke was made from the putting green. So again, what area of the course was the ball struck at? And again, it's separate. Like I said earlier, putting green, everything else, right? Everything else is looped together. Kind of putting green is a very special place. Got its own little area for that. So like I mentioned earlier, coming back into play here, where was the stroke made from? And within that first part, stroke was made from anywhere except the putting green. Okay, now we're going to look at, okay, well, where did it come to rest at? So the stroke was made anywhere except the putting green. Would it come to rest anywhere on the course except the putting green? Or when the ball would have come to rest on the putting green? And then lastly, when the ball would have come to rest out of bounds. That one's pretty easy. It's out of bounds. We'll cover that one. But the first two, again, where was it played from? Where did it come to rest? Not putting green, putting green. 11.2c1, stroke made from anywhere except the putting green. The player must take relief based on the estimated spot where the ball would have come to rest if not deflected or stopped. So we're guesstimating, again, where the stroke was made from. We're guesstimating where it would have come to rest. That's not an exact science. If someone swatched your ball, you don't know where it was going to come to rest, but you're estimating, well, based on how hard I hit it, the conditioning, the slope, it was taking it down the hill, or it would have stopped thereabouts where it was. We're estimating here. So the stroke made from anywhere except the putting green. So again, the stroke was made from not the putting. So again, wide area, this is where it's mostly going to come into play. So this is the section of the rule that's going to be most applicable most of the time. A lot of areas to have made a stroke from on the golf course that are not the putting green. Obviously, big area there. So if the stroke is made from anywhere except the putting green, when the ball would have come to rest anywhere on the course except the putting green, the player must drop the original ball to their ball in this relief area. So again, looking at our graph, stroke made from except the putting green comes to rest on the course except the putting green. So here, teeing area, bunker, penalty area, general area, teeing area, bunker, penalty area, general. So we're excluding all the area of the course of putting green, and all the other ones are in play. So when you read this is how you want to think about it right here. Anywhere except the putting green to land anywhere except on the putting green. So stroke made from, and then where did it come to rest at? Or where theoretically would it come to rest at? And this is an estimate. It's not an exact science. Again, there's an interpretation that says, if there's a penalty area, bunker, and general area all in the same place, what do you do? It's an estimate. All right, so looking at, okay, so we've established the stroke is made not from the putting green, and it came to rest, estimated, not on the putting green. Our reference point is the estimated spot where the ball would have come to rest. Again, the ball might have come to rest in this spot in the rough. That's our estimate. That's our reference point. And then the relief area, similar to what we saw last time, we got one club length, but with these limits, must be in the same area of the course as the reference point and must not be nearer the hole than the reference point. Again, in this situation, we're dropping a ball, right? So we're estimating where it would have come to rest from there, right? Would have come to rest right around here if it wasn't deflected by somebody else intentionally. Reference point, and I get a very big relief area. It needs to be in the same area of the course. So even if the ball would have come to rest theoretically there, in the middle, the reference point, you can drop it within a club length to the left or right because it's flatter, it's a better lie, whatever. We got a big area here to drop it in. All right, and then kind of coming back to this, it doesn't mention this, but it says, okay, ball came to rest from anywhere except the putting green, or stroke made from anywhere except the putting green, come to rest on the putting green. What about in a penalty area? Because there's situations where you simply take relief, and there's an interpretation about that that specifically states that when a ball in motion is deliberately deflected or stopped, and it is estimated that it would have come to rest in a penalty area, the player can either drop it in the penalty area or simply take relief. In that case, said, well, it would have gone to the penalty area, it's estimated to land over there. You could also estimate, therefore, your reference point, where did the ball cross into the penalty area, and whether it's yellow or red, you've got your applicable options. We do cover the penalty area rule here in a month or so. But again, and you are still going to get a penalty stroke for this if you're taking penalty area relief. You're not absolved of that. All right, so the second part, stroke made from anywhere except the putting green, and would the ball would have come to rest on the putting green, right? So in this case, we've got anywhere except the putting green, teeing area, bunker, penalty area, general area, one of the other 4 areas, of course, on the putting green. So again, where was it stroke made from? Where would it have estimated to come to rest? Let's look at that. So the player must place the ball, again, we're placing here, the original ball or another ball on the estimated spot where the ball would have come to rest using the procedures for replacing a ball under 14.2b2 or 14.2e. Again, we're looking at placing it here, right? You're going to place the ball in this case. You're on the putting green here. You're not dropping it in this case. You're going to place it. Again, 95% of the time, you're going to place them on the putting green. But there are instances where you don't. And that's in Rule 19, mostly for an unplayable ball, and Rule 17, which we'll get to for a penalty area. But again, placing in here. All right, then the last part is, okay, stroke made from anywhere except putting green, right? Teeing area, bunker, penalty, or general area would have come to rest out of bounds, and simply the player must take stroke and distance relief. So if your ball is heading clearly out of bounds and someone swats it or deliberately deflected or stopped, you don't get a loophole out of that. The ball obviously would have come out of bounds. You have to proceed under the out of bounds procedure, which Rule 18 we cover, again, toward the end of this series. All right, so that's the first part, stroke made from not the putting green. Now, okay, the stroke made from the putting green, 11.2c2. So we're putting here again, kind of a different ball game, right? We've got a different set of, different situation here on the putting green. So stroke made from the putting green, the stroke does not count, and the original ball or another ball must be replaced on its original spot, which if not known must be estimated. In here, it doesn't say where the ball might have come to rest. In the other cases, we've got where the stroke was made from, where might it have come to rest. In here, that doesn't matter. It's where was the stroke made from, the putting green. It doesn't matter where it would have come to rest. Teeing area, bunker, penalty area, general area, or the putting green, the 5 areas of the course, or even out of bounds. Theoretically, if you were to putt the ball and somehow it would have gone out of bounds or something, or you made a stroke with the putting green that would have gone out of bounds, doesn't matter. We don't care about that second part. We don't care about where it was going. The only thing that matters is the stroke was made from the putting green. Simply, again, the stroke does not count, and the original ball or another ball must be replaced on its original spot. Again, this is all deliberately deflected or stopped, right? So you putt it and someone goes over there and knocks your ball away deliberately. Again, no, it doesn't happen that much, but if it did, the stroke is just canceled and replayed. And then the end here, this is the penalty structure here. Penalty for playing incorrectly substituted ball or playing from wrong place in breach of Rule 11.2. You're going to get the general penalty under 6.3b or 14.7a. And then if multiple breaches result from a single related act, and see Rule 1.3c4. So again, just kind of cleaning up there. And that's 11.2. That's deliberately deflected or stopped. We've got one more section left. Doesn't take that long. So we can do some questions here, and then we'll be done in 5 to 10 minutes. Ashley, do we have any questions on 11.2 or anything that we want to do for a couple seconds?
No questions. Oh, just kidding. Here's a question. Okay. What if a fan deliberately stops a ball from going out of bounds?
Then that would apply. Yeah, the person deliberately, and that's what happens in most cases, right? When normal people play, we don't have fans or spectators, that do that. There might be the group in front of us that deliberately deflects or stops their ball. There was an old video I debated about showing, but it was the old rules, and there was a lot of verbiage in there that, well, you know, it was a little different. It was covered by Rule 19 or something, and I don't want to throw that in there. But if a fan deliberately stops the ball from going out of bounds, then the player, again, like we saw, is estimated the ball would have come out of bounds if the player didn't deliberately deflect it. You're going to be under stroke and distance. So the player still has to go under out of bounds procedure for that. If it was known or virtually certain the ball would have come to rest out of bounds. Or not even known or virtually certain, it was estimated to have come to rest out of bounds, and it was deliberately deflected or stopped by a fan. So, okay. Any other questions on those?
Nothing else in the chat. If anyone needs to unmute, you can. Otherwise, we can move on to 11.3.
Yeah, and then again, we'll have an open Q&A at the end, and then we'll kind of double back and let's talk about that D7 one again when we talk about that. So last thing is 11.3. Again, looking at the structure of this rule, we've got 11.1 accidental, 11.2 deliberate, 11.3 deliberate. Again, 11.2 and 3 I kind of gang together more because we've got deliberate actions here. And this is deliberate acts to affect a ball in motion or alter conditions to affect a ball in motion. So when a ball is in motion, a player must not deliberately take any of these actions to affect where that ball, whether the player's own ball or another player's ball, might come to rest. So it's any ball. It's not talking about just yours or it's another player's ball. It could be an opponent in match play. It could be another player in stroke play, or it could be your own ball. Any of those three situations. Again, deliberate, right? 11.3, we've got deliberate twice right there. The deliberate act to do that, intentional. Again, we see it's a ball in motion. That's a ball in play. It's a live ball after the result of a stroke. And again, like I said, I kind of peeked early there. It says a ball in motion. It doesn't assign ownership. It says a ball in motion, any ball, player's own ball or another player's ball, stroke play, match play, it doesn't matter. Where it might come to rest, you're going to be penalized here for that under these situations. So a ball, doesn't have ownership necessarily. So the first thing you can't do is you cannot alter the physical conditions by taking any of the actions listed in 8.1a, such as replacing a divot or pressing down a raised area of turf, or lift or move a loose impediment or a movable obstruction. Can't do any of those. The first part, we talked about 8.1a 2 weeks ago when we first started. I mentioned there's a video of Camilo Villegas doing this back a while ago where he chips up and the ball, it's right by the green, steep slope, tips up. The fringe is very, very finely cut, so it doesn't go all the way and comes back. As it goes back, he's sitting there and he starts fixing divots where the ball might come to rest. This would apply. It didn't happen to Ryan Palmer this year. It was in Hawaii. I think it was the Tournament of Champions, but this was called into question on the telecast. And then afterwards, I think the rules officials talked to him about this, where chipped the ball up and it was rolling back, and there were these pieces of, clumps of soil that were left on the ground. He kind of flicked them out of the way, and he said, I didn't deliberately do it to affect the ball much. I was just frustrated and swinging, and so didn't do it with a deliberate action. So he wasn't penalized. But you see this every once in a while around, green side surfaces when the ball's coming back to a player. They can't step down and try to put down that raised turf, so the ball might come to rest there and not get in a poor lie. You're doing something to affect the ball in motion deliberately. Can't do that. And then obviously lift, remove a loose impediment or movable obstruction. So that's three things you can't do. Obviously within confines of 8.1a, there's a lot of things, but there's three listed things you need to remember that you can't do. And the exception to this is moving a flagstick ball at rest on the putting green and other player equipment. So kind of like we talked about earlier, this rule does not prohibit a player from lifting or moving the removed flagstick. So if I'm putting and it's heading toward a removed flagstick, myself, if I have that time, or someone else could lift and remove the removed flagstick from the ground so my ball doesn't hit it, that's okay. That's fine. You can do that here because that's an exception here. A ball at rest on the putting green. So if I'm, my ball is on the putting green and someone is putting, and as their ball is in motion, I'm like, oh, that might hit my ball. I need to mark it, pick it up. I can do that to affect the ball in motion. That's always fine. Or other player equipment, right? And this is other than a ball at rest anywhere except the putting green or a ball marker anywhere on the course. About other player equipment, kind of like I referenced earlier, if I'm putting and it's going toward my wedge or another player's wedge, it's about to, that player can go pick it up because it's an exception to this part right here that you can do that. So a flag stick, ball at rest on the putting green, and it's key part there about the flag stick is a remove flag stick. This is not a flag stick in the hole. That's a whole thing. That's in Rule 13.2, which we'll get to in a couple weeks. But a remove flag stick. So when you see removed, think on the ground, laying down, out of the way. Obviously, we know that we can still putt with the flag stick in, but when you move it to affect the ball in motion, it's got to be lying on the ground, out of its position in the hole. If it's in the hole, you can't go deliberately remove a flag stick in the hole to affect the ball in motion. Can't do that. This is specifically a removed flag stick. So I didn't highlight it, but that's a key verb there. Remove flag stick. And then again, like I said, removing the flag stick from the hole, including by tending it while a ball is in motion, is covered by Rule 13.2, not by this rule. So if this happens on the golf course and you say, oh, someone did something to affect the ball in motion, they removed the flag stick that was in the hole, go to 11.3, it'll say, okay, right area, but you need to go to Rule 13.2 to cover that one. So because that one's very specific. And even that rule, when you go to 13.2, if it was, it might kick you back to 11.2 if you actually stop the ball. So there's a lot of ping pong back and forth that can happen here. But in this case, we're saying if this happens with the flag stick in the hole, okay, right area, but you need to go to 13.2 to cover that, and then it'll cover it there. So, and then the last thing is the penalty structure, general penalty for doing any of this. So if you remove a movable obstruction or a loose impediment or anything covered by 8.1a, you're going to get the general penalty. And on that, it doesn't matter necessarily if the ball even gets there. So if I'm putting up a hill and it takes the slope and then it's coming back and I see a bunker rake just lying on the ground, that's movable obstruction. If I remove that to affect the ball in motion deliberately, even if the ball stops short of that, I'm going to be penalized because it doesn't talk about hitting something, right? It doesn't talk about, it has to connect it or roll past it. At the time I did whatever action was prohibited, move the rake, movable obstruction. Did I do it to deliberately affect the ball in motion? Yes, I did. Okay, I'm going to get penalized. So even if the ball stopped short, when the ball was rolling, there's conceivably have hit that, and I was breaching the rules right away. I get penalized instantaneously for that. So that being just, you need to let it be if your ball is going to hit a movable obstruction or a loose impediment. You should let it be. And there's nothing talking about hitting it. When we get to Rule 13.2, we're going to see it talks about it has to hit this thing, right? It has to make contact. There's an action verb there. There's contact. So in this case, in 11.3, it's the intent, really, deliberately trying to affect the ball in motion. So, that's that. And again, it has the blue text there to say, in foursomes and four ball, if a partner does something, then I would get saddled with it. So if I'm in a partnered event and I hit it and it comes back and my partner moves the rake or my caddy moves the rake to affect the ball in motion, I get penalized for that. That's what the blue text is saying. So that's all we've got on 11 and covered 11.1, 2, and 3. So a lot going on there. So any questions or anything in general on 11.3 or just anything in 11 or just anything just in general that you want to talk about that's not about Rule 11?
Robert, we have an 11.3 question, and you might have just answered it, but just to reiterate, under 11.3, it says, quote, any other player. I take that to mean a player cannot move his or her own equipment on the putting green. Is that correct?
Let's see here. No, you can still move your equipment. So if it's your wedge or your bag, I think any other player equipment is just kind of grouping it all into the same thing. Like, for instance, if I'm playing, I could go move my opponent's bag or something, technically. But yeah, I also interpret that to mean your items as well, your equipment as well.
Okay. One other general question about the rule. You'll like this one. Can you talk about Phil Mickelson at the U.S. Open when he stopped his putt?
Yeah, so that was, and that was at Shinnecock. So that was, he putted it, yeah, and blasts downhill, goes up and hits it. That's an interesting one because when we look at the rule, it's a little confusing, but that ball was not stopped or deflected in the way that it's really getting down to the nitpicky there, but he made a stroke at the ball. So he made a stroke at a moving ball, and that's covered by Rule 10, in which case the stroke counts and you play the ball as it lies. He gets a 2-stroke penalty with that. But in that case, he didn't deflect or stop it. Now, if he'd have gone and put his foot down or put his putter down to just, ricochet it, then yeah, that would cover this rule. But that's playing a moving ball, and that's not covered by this rule. So he played it from where it lies, and if he had theoretically hold that ball that he hit while moving, that would have been the end of the hole. He would have counted the stroke he made, 2 more penalty strokes and hold out. I'm not sure what he was doing there, but that was covered by Rule 10 at this point, and not being deliberately deflected or stopped. So, yeah. Hopefully it never happens again. We don't have to worry about that. But again, very technical, right? You made a stroke at it, the forward movement of the club to hit the ball, and that's covered by a different rule. So, good question though.
That's all that's in the chat. It's general Q&A time, so if anyone would like to unmute, feel free. Robert will be here.
Well, and if anybody's still out there that wants that, we're going to look at D7, and let's just read that.
Sorry, can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
11.3 question.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Player A is putting on the putting green. Player B deliberately drops the flagstick to block the ball. Player B would get the general penalty, but where would player A play from?
Yeah, so in that case, the ball was deliberately deflected or stopped. So player B would get the general. And now, again, it does depend, right, on the form of play, right? Because if it's match play and player B deliberately throws a flag stick or a club or anything to deliberately deflect the ball in motion, if it's match play, then they get the general penalty. That's a loss of hold. The hole's over. We're done here. There is no cancel and replay. If it's stroke play, again, in that 11.2 area, if a stroke is made from the putting green, it's deliberately deflected or stopped, it's canceled and replay. So in that case, if it's stroke play, me, player A, I make a stroke at it, and player B deliberately deflects or stops it, okay, I'm going to go put the ball back and replay it. Player B is going to get 2 penalty strokes there. So if the stroke is made from the putting green, regardless of where it was deliberately deflected or stopped, it's going to be canceled and replay. I'm not going to be penalized, the one who made the stroke, but player B certainly would be for 2 strokes in stroke play. And then again, in match play, doesn't matter. The hole's over. There's general penalty, loss of hole. If that's the case, some people, I think I've asked before, like, well, wouldn't that be like disqualifiable and cheating? That's different, but just straight up, it's going to be 11.2.
Okay, a couple more here. Sorry, you can move your equipment or ball marker or flag stick on the green with no penalty. But if a rake is on the green and it's moved while a ball is in motion, that's a penalty?
Yes. And because it says other player equipment, and a rake is only equipment if it's in your possession. So if you're holding the rake in your hand, then yeah, you can move it. But if a rake is on the green or near the green, right, in the fringe, that would be considered that's a movable obstruction. That's the first part of 11.3. You can't move anything under 8.1a, loose impediment, movable obstruction. That's what the rake falls under. So yeah, and that's a good point when looking at trying to figure the rules out. What does a rake categorize as? It's not equipment unless I'm holding it. So if I'm not holding it, it's on the ground. It's a movable obstruction. So yeah, if I'm putting and my caddy, as the ball's coming back or something, moves the rake to affect it, then yeah, deliberately moves it to affect it, then yeah, that I'm going to get, in that case, the general penalty of 2 strokes in stroke play. So that's a good, again, example of trying to classify what is a rake. Rake is a movable obstruction. Now we can move on. Because if you look at, where does it say rake? Well, it's not going to say that, but it's going to say movable obstruction. And we know that's where a rake falls under.
Okay. Nothing else in the chat. So if you want to move on to D7.
Yeah. I got to find it here. Sorry. Putting greens. So this, oops, it's on the USGA website. rules clarification. Sorry, I was trying to read it and think about it that way. Yeah, there we go. So to preface it, the question was, if there's an accidental double hit, we know that Rule 10 covers that to say no penalty, move on. Conversely, if there's a double hit, again, if it hits the flagstick and ricochets off, then that's a little different. Then this would apply if it was in play. But if it was an accidental double hit made from putting green, as in putt, you know, tap tap accidentally, says. I mean, I think in a very literal way, then yeah, you probably would cancel and replay that because it says exception 2 to Rule 11.1b applies except that when a ball played from the putting green accidentally hits the player or the club used by the player to make the stroke. I think typically we would see, okay, if the ball horseshoes and it comes back and hits the club, or let's say you putt it and, you know, ball goes up and it accidentally hits your club, then we're saying, you know, that's still going to be played as it lies. Exception 2. Yeah, I mean, so the ball would be played as it lies because when you read it, you know, if this is in play, right, model local D7, if a ball played from putting green accidentally hits the club used by the player to make a stroke, the stroke counts. So Rule 10 is still applicable here. So there's nothing different about that. So that's why it's, I think, a little confusing because it adds to an already hard rule in 11.1b exception 2. But yeah, if you double hit accidentally, then you're still, you know, that's still the club. You still are playing it as it lies. So that's always going to be the case. Putting green or not, this model local rule doesn't change anything in that regard. So it's a good question and a good thing to be, you know, think critically about. And I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, you still play as it lies. There's no cancel and replay there if this is in play. In any case, if it's not in play, if it's on the putting green, again, Rule 10 applies because Rule 10 talks about hitting the ball twice on accident. It doesn't talk about what area of the course. You know, teeing area, putting green, penalty area, bunker, general area. It doesn't matter. So we play as it lies. Any other questions or anything? Cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming again. If you have any questions, let me know. My email's on our website. It's just rduke@coloradogolf.org. And again, we'll get this video posted here in the next day or two on our website. And then again, next week, we're looking at Rule 12, which is bunkers. Not a long rule, but there's certainly a lot going on there because bunkers, again, very sacred area. You can't be grounding your club behind it. So definitely important. Not as long as the last 2 or 3 we've done, but still pretty key. And then we get into Rule 13, 14. Those are big ones. So we'll do Rule 12 next week, same time. Again, thanks everybody for coming out, and we'll see you next week. Please let me know if you have any additional questions. Thanks.